Welcome. If you just joined us, solicitor Nick Freeman and tech journalist Georgie Barrett are still with me. And in a moment, we'll take your calls on whether a Conservative MP was wrong to shame working mothers. Miriam Kate said children are going to school with nappies because mums return to the workplace way too soon. What do you make of that? And also, should Boris Johnson apologise for how he handled the pandemic? The COVID inquiry is currently hearing from his former aides, who said he wasn't well equipped to manage the crisis. It comes after an inquiry heard that Johnson allegedly said, "Why are we destroying the economy for people who will die anyway?" Does Boris Johnson need to apologise for this and everything he did in those early months? I want to know your thoughts on that. 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Calls from landlines may cost up to 16 pence per minute, plus any call setup fees, and calls from mobiles may cost considerably more. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, of course. Just search for Jerry Vine on 5 and use the hashtag Alexis Conran. Now, was Conservative MP wrong to blame working mums for a rise in children wearing nappies at school? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need to give us a call. Miriam Cates.
Of their children, instead of allowing them to suffer some discomfort. I mean, 90% of reception children are saying that they have children in their class at the age of 5 who are not potty trained. So there is a problem, and I appreciate, whilst acknowledging there's a problem, mothers have to work, and I imagine some of them are single-parent families who are under financial pressure. But she also says what she's doing is, I don't think she's doing it, saying these things to shame. She's also saying, look, there's an obesity problem, there's a problem with obsession with smartphones, and she's telling the truth. I think she should be congratulated. I think if people feel ashamed, then they need to look at their own emotions and say, look, I need to manage this feeling, and how am I going to sort it out? Because the situation is wrong. If a child who's 5 isn't potty trained, which is really a fundamental thing, then how is he ever or she ever going to learn the sort of life skills that are needed to get to have some sort of successful life? So it's a difficult situation, but I think she should be congratulated on speaking the truth. And I think mothers who can identify with this problem should say, actually, she's right and we need to sort this out. How are we going to sort it out? That's what we need, a solution.
OK. Georgie, I know you're gagging to say a lot of things.
I want to jump in then.
Thank you for letting me speak.
OK, yeah. Well, I guess, so I agree with some points, but the fundamental one is that there's 2 parents when it comes to potty training a kids. Yeah. So why is this directed at women? It should be directed at parents in general. And I think that is a really dangerous thing to do when we're trying to get women back into the workplace, when mum guilt is a real thing. Like, do not, compound that issue any further. So she should never have conflated those 2 things. And then the other thing is that, it's just not true. Like, OK, yes, kids aren't being potty trained correctly, but that's got no relevance to the fact that women are going back to work. If anything, nurseries are actually really good at potty training kids. Like, that is what they do. So the women who are working probably have potty trained kids. It's the parents that maybe are trying to do it themselves, who don't have the support in place, that means that, kids are going to primary school not being potty trained. So I think the reverse is actually...
But she's essentially saying that women are GDP obsessed. Yeah. Those are her words. We're not putting these words in. They are the words that GDP obsessed. What does that mean? Sort of, I take it to mean, Nick, as money obsessed, right?
They need to earn money. There's a cost of living crisis, and we have...
Well, hang on a minute. GDP obsessed and desperate to put food on the table are 2 separate things, don't you think?
I think earning money to provide for the necessities in life are linked.
Sure, but why is she not saying parents are unfortunately having to go to work too early because they are living through a cost of living crisis? She chose the words GDP obsessed. To me, that means people who are just obsessed with making money.
Maybe it's an unfortunate phrase. Look, we are in a cost of living crisis.
Right.
Everyone's under financial pressure. And I assume what she meant from that was there is a necessity about going back to work early to put food on the table. That's what I think she means.
It's such a sort of horrible way of saying that women who are trying their really hardest, and again, I don't know, why is this just aimed specifically at women? This should be this is not a gendered issue.
It shouldn't be a gender issue, but I suppose if you've got a situation where whoever earns the most money, I mean, look, there are a lot of single-parent families, aren't there? And it's literally impossible or very difficult for a single parent, whether it's a man or a woman, to look after a child and juggle all the things and provide a good standard of living. It's very, very difficult. And I think it's wrong to say nursery should potty train children.
No, but that's what they do. They honestly offer it. As a parent who's got a kid who's potty trained, well, she's a year and a half, so she's about to start this journey. They say you just do it at the weekend, and they do it for the rest of the time. So like they will help you through the whole process.
What Miriam Cates didn't mention, which is slightly concerning, I think, for a lot of people, is that, for example, we know of the people who claim universal credit, 41% of those are in work.
Yep.
So we've got an extremely large number of people who are working and still not being able to cover the costs of living.
Yep.
Take one of them. This came from the charity Coram. They say for a year, full-time nursery place for a child is £14,500.
Yeah,
we're talking about a lot of money.
Massive amount of money.
So,
Huge.
So saying to, and as Georgie says, singling out women in the parent household, you're going back too early to work and you're not potty training your kids. How does that balance with the fact that people don't have enough money in order to put food on the table, let alone find childcare?
But why are we in this situation now? That the point I'm making is because it's a cost of living crisis and women or men, everyone is under pressure to earn some money. And
well,
I think
not necessarily. I wanted to go back to work not for just a money thing. I wanted to go back because I found it like,
OK, well, my view is...
It's important to have that other thing.
OK, well, I don't know your personal circumstances, but I think if you have children, you make a choice to have children, you have to make with that choice, I'm going to devote enough time to bring them up properly and teach them the fundamental things. It's rather, if you'll excuse the analogy, you buy a puppy, you've got to train it. You can't just say, I'm having a puppy and I'm going off to work.
So I think this is a separate, I think that is a separate issue. Okay. And I think I do agree with your point that one of the reasons why kids aren't being potty trained correctly, nothing to do with women working, it's because sort of as a generation, generally, parents do have this like low tolerance to discomfort. They want to be led by the kid a lot more, and that means that kids aren't being potty trained. Nothing to do with women.
OK, let's look at a couple of messages on social media. Ellie on Twitter says, I returned to work full-time when my child was 6 weeks old. He was completely potty trained and out of nappies by the age of 2. It is simply down to idle, lazy parenting. Thank you, Ellie.
Again, I wouldn't say lazy there. I would say more that it's down to parenting, thinking they're doing the right thing by not sort of, by forcing it on children, but actually parents need to know that there is a little bit of discomfort and then you sort of count the other side of it. OK, let's take another one. Melanie on Facebook says, I'm a childminder and have been for the last 18 years, and I can honestly say that not a single one of my little ones has gone to school in nappies. We will work in partnership with parents to support them to get their children out of nappies when they are ready. I wonder... You mentioned this a little bit, Nick. Miriam Cates absolutely says this in her speech. She says, and I'm going to quote directly from her, a child who has not been trained in this most rudimentary of skills by the age of 5 has little chance of being trained in all the other essential skills and virtues required for a successful life. Is she saying that if you haven't been potty trained by the age of 5, you've got little chance of succeeding in life?
I think she's saying you've got certainly considerably less chance. And I think she's saying that because, most kids are potty trained by the age of 2, aren't they? As I understand it from my memory. And it didn't take long. And it didn't take long. And I was involved in that process. And I found it really easy. It's just a bit of discipline, a bit of approach. And I think she's saying yes, because what we're talking about is not just the act of potty training. We're talking about the attitude of the parents who are not training their children.
But and these children, like the attitude comes from a place of, I can't be asked.
I think it does. I think there is a degree of laziness.
No, I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think it's about thinking they're doing the right thing for their children and that they,
it's too soft,
they want...
isn't
it is too soft.
It's too soft.
It may be too soft.
You and I will probably agree. It's too soft. They need to make the children just suffer a little bit of discomfort to get it sorted.
OK, let's find out what people are saying at home. Jenny in London. Jenny, good afternoon. What do you make of what Miriam Cates is saying? Is it... GDP obsessed, as the way she put it, mothers who want to get to work too early that are neglecting the potty training of their children?
Well, I don't understand that comment because, as we've already mentioned, potty training takes place between 18 months and 24 months. So maternity leave is only 6 months. So at what point does this woman want women to stay at home until?
I think she is basically saying until they're potty trained. Until
2 years.
I think it goes all the way up to 36 weeks is the optimum time to potty train your kids. I mean, what do you also make of the comment that I've just read to Nick and Georgie just now, that if a child goes to school at the age of 5 and is not yet potty trained, well, that's it for that child. Their options of success are really limited. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, there is an issue if a child at the age of 5 hasn't been potty trained. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is a huge question there. But from what I understand, even if you put your child into a nursery over the age of 2, they actually request that the child is potty trained. So I don't know where it may be one of the, exceptional cases that perhaps one child might be a special needs child, someone with a learning disability that may have issues with actually potty training. But in general, most people actually get their child to be potty trained over the age of 2. I don't understand where
90% of receptions they're saying that they have at least one child that is not potty trained. Jenny, let's look at the broader context of this. Is Miriam Cates basically saying that women are going back to work too early, they're not spending enough time with their kids? I mean, you made a very good point. The maternity leave is 6 months. I remember working in Canada for a while, and there was a TV advert and said, good news, the Canadian government, this was 20 years ago, is proud to announce that both mother and father can get a full 1-year maternity leave paid for by the government. And I thought, well, wow, this is exceptional. Is that the problem? Is the problem that people have to go to work too quickly?
I think there's two arguments. There are some women who are in what I call high achieving jobs that are almost peer pressured to go back to work early. And there are others who financially cannot afford to stay at home. So, the argument regarding women staying at home, I think for some may be a luxury, for others they cannot do it. It's a necessity both of them go back to work. And not forgetting that on maternity leave, although it's 6 months, it's not 6 months full pay. It goes on a sliding scale. So even for women will find it difficult, even some families to stay at home for the full 6 months.
OK, Jenny, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. Great call to get us started. Maxine's in Dorset. Good afternoon, Maxine. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon. I'm a grandma to 3 children. Two of my grandchildren are a 3-year-old and a 7-month-old.
Yes.
They live about 3 hours from me, and their mum juggles 3 jobs. And I quite agree that, yes, mums have to go back to work early as a necessity. But the 3-year-old is already potty trained, and he's well in advance of his peers that don't go to nursery. He was very fortunate, being a COVID baby, to get into a woodland nursery, so he was able to socialise. So he speaks well, he's ready potty trained. Potty trained was done in the summer, where they don't need nappies, and they're all very happy.
Maxine,
but juggling 3 jobs.
Maxine, did you help potty train your little your grandchildren?
I did.
Yeah, because my mum's very good at keeping steering me, being like, Georgie, you should start thinking about the next thing. And yeah, she's already bought the first potty in our house.
But Maxine, to come back to Miriam Cates, do you think she was right to single out these women? She called them GDP obsessed, sort of. I take that to mean as people obsessed with sort of making money, earning more and more. Do you think she was right to single them out, to say, hang on, essentially you're neglecting your duties as mothers because you haven't properly spent enough time potty training your kids before you send them to reception? Do you think she was right to do that?
No, I think she's grossly unfair because she doesn't know the individual circumstances. So I think she was unfair. I do think that children do need to be potty trained before they get to school because they can't expect teachers to be doing that as well.
OK, Maxine, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Only because I want to squeeze in Suzanne, who's called us from Cornwall. Thank you, Maxine. Suzanne, welcome to the show. What would you like to say?
Thank you. I'd just like to say my children are older now, but I remember getting a letter from the school when they started that they had to be potty trained.
Yeah.
They're sort of late 20s now. So You know, I'm just amazed that there are children at 5 who are not potty trained,
Okay,
unless
Suzanne,
there is a health
what
problem,
happens?
you know?
What happens to a single parent? Okay, single parent who cannot afford to be out of their job for more than 3 months. Some even, we've had reports of people going back to work after 2 weeks, even shorter, because they cannot afford not to work. What do we do with those people?
Thing is, children really don't get potty trained until they're about age 2.
Mm-hmm.
Really, that's new to me, not really relevant, because they will be in nappies at nursery, and it's probably from about age 2 that they'd introduce the potty training. What I can't get is how a child gets to 5.
Yes.
That's my, you know, so I don't think it's about people going to work early.
Okay. Again, as Nick and Georgie has said, and I think that there are different circumstances for people. We can't know what's going on, but you're right. 5 is quite is a little bit too late. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you to all of you for your calls and messages. Although I'd love to see Miriam Cater's evidence that if you are at the age of 5 and you haven't been potty trained, the chances that you will have a successful life afterwards, or the way she put it, which was the chance of being trained in all the other essential skills and virtues required for a successful life are minimised. I'd love to see her evidence for that.
Well, I'm with her on it, and I think she's probably right. She's probably making an assumption. No, I think she's making an assumption, but...
Right, so it's an assumption.
I think it's an assumption. I don't know whether it's based on any empirical evidence.
Right.
But I think it's a very valid point. If you can't sort yourself out by the age of 5, you're so far behind such an essential and fundamental thing, you're going to struggle with it, like maths and history and geography, and then maybe your O-levels or GCSEs and A-levels. Or you're behind.
I will find you a maths genius that's not potty trained.
I'm sure there
that's
is
my mission now. Look, we're going to move on now after the break as the COVID inquiry continues. Should Boris Johnson apologise for how he handled the crisis? His former aides have suggested he wasn't equipped to handle things, and he's alleged to have questioned the need for lockdowns. Does the ex-Prime Minister need to say sorry? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. We'll speak to you after the break. OK, stay with me now. Section 60 of the Metropolitan Police Act in 1839 says that it is illegal to beat or shake rugs, carpets or mats, with the exception of doormats, before 8 a.m. Do you know what? I thought this is a good opportunity to ask you about this. Can you actually sort of put these into practice? Like if my neighbour shook their rug at 7:30, can I actually take them to court?
Well, you could video it, you could make a contemporaneous note, and you could phone the local constabulary and say, look, I've got a crime here, and they'd probably conclude it's not actually in the public interest to pursue it.
So why don't they ditch the law then?
Well, there's so many archaic laws, aren't there? And there are so many archaic laws and lawyers.
Archaic lawyers. Right.
I gave myself away there.
Welcome. Nick and Georgie are with me now. Should Boris Johnson apologise for how he handled the pandemic and for the comments he's alleged to have made in March 2020? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need to give us a call. Former Downing Street aides are giving evidence at the COVID inquiry today, with Dominic Cummings comparing Mr Johnson to the mayor of Jaws, who refused to shut down the beaches. Now, ex-Downing Street Director of Communications Lee Kane was a little bit more diplomatic. Here's what he had to say.
I think what will probably be clear in COVID, it was the wrong crisis for this Prime Minister's skill set, which is different, I think, from not potentially being up to the job of being Prime Minister.
What do you mean by the wrong crisis for this Prime Minister's skill set, Mr Kane?
Could we use just straightforward English, Mr Kane, please?
So I think he's somebody who would often delay making decisions, would often seek counsel from multiple sources.
Now, these comments come just one day after the inquiry heard that Boris Johnson questioned the need for lockdowns. Now, according to notes in an aide's diary, Boris Johnson said, "Why are we destroying the economy for people who would die anyway soon?" He's also alleged to have said, "We're killing the patient to tackle the tumour." Georgie, it's going to be quite hard for a lot of people who lost loved ones during that time. But is it incumbent for the former Prime Minister to come out and say, sorry, mistakes were made, perhaps some of the things that we did weren't quite right, we apologise?
Well, but I want a more sincere apology than that. So, yes.
I didn't do a very good job.
No, you didn't do a very good job of that.
Sorry.
Yes, these are horrific comments. As you said, there are families who are currently grieving at the moment, who've lost, parents or children or loved ones. And they're basically saying that, these lives were collateral, that they probably had nothing else to give to the world. And, hey, it was worth it when it came to saving the economy. I mean, where's the humility? Where's the humanity? It's just, they are just so offensive on so many levels. And it shows just how incompetent he was, how he didn't take things seriously, his disregard for the human cost that was going on here. And it is honestly worse than what I ever could imagine. I thought it was pretty bad, but these kind of comments are sort of just completely off the mark.
We should say that the comment, why are we destroying the economy for people who will die anyway soon, was recorded in a meeting by Imran Shafi, former private secretary of Boris Johnson. Now, when asked whether the comments were made by his old boss, Mr Shafi said, I can't say for sure, but I think it was the former Prime Minister. This was in a meeting between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. Nick, this inquiry is going to go on for quite some time. Yep. A lot of evidence is going to be gone through, and we will get some sort of judgment at the end of it. But for now, when people are hearing these horrific comments, do you think the former Prime Minister has got a case to answer?
I think the comments are brutal, but I think these comments were in the context. If he made them, and first of all, we don't know that he made them, but let's assume for the sake of this discussion he did make them. They're made in the context of him grappling with Sunak with the biggest problem after Brexit he's ever had to deal with. And if you start to edit a real and truthful discussion with countries' leaders, how are they ever going to resolve any issues? So in his view, he was saying, look, the most vulnerable are going to die. So the alternative is we let people carry on. We don't crash the economy, because if we do crash the economy, people are still going to die. So he was just having a very frank conversation. It wasn't, just a moment, it wasn't a delicate conversation, but surely he's entitled, within the context of that conversation, it was a private meeting with Sunak, to say what he honestly believed. And it's quite clear he was against lockdown. Lockdown happened, I think, 3 days after this alleged conversation. And, who knows whether he was right or wrong? Did lockdown work? I'm not sure that it did. What he should do, in my view, is explain what he meant. Explain to the British public, this is what I was grappling with. These were the decisions I had to make. And I'm sorry if I sounded brutal, but I had to sound brutal.
And he will get a chance to do so, because he will also appear in the COVID inquiry. Go on, Georgie.
But for me, it points to the culture of him as a leader. It just the sort of cavalier attitude, the throwaway comments, the sort of speaking about people's lives in that way. It shows to me how this Prime Minister was just so unfit for the job.
All right, which is what we heard from Lee Kane there. Let's find out what people are saying at home, because obviously quite a lot of people want to have their say. Syra in London. Good afternoon, Syra. What would you like to say?
Yes, I mean, I've heard what he said, but it's a private conversation. And, it's not so much about what people say, but what they do. And I think Boris really led the country well during the COVID outbreak. My sister works in America, and the way the vaccines were rolled out there compared to England, Britain, I mean, he did a great job. And we have
but Syra, just to remind you, though, that when it comes to comparisons of deaths per million, we had more deaths per million than the US. In fact, when you look at all the G20 economies, sort of comparable countries, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, Sweden, we've had a worse record than all those countries. So he kind of got all those decisions as correct as you're saying.
No. But that's because, that could have been because the lockdown sort of took a little longer than it arrived a little longer. But then, to be fair, those are difficult decisions. And, he had to make a decision regarding, crashing the economy or whether to actually, start, but I mean, when it came to doing the big things and I think he did a great job. And yes, we had more mortality, but there are other confounding factors as well. Okay. So we have to look into that.
Sarah, sorry to interrupt you. Am I right in saying, are you a doctor?
Yes, I am a doctor.
So let me pass this by you. This came out in the inquiry. It's just come out now because it's all happening as we're on air. Sir Patrick Vallance wrote in his notebooks in August 2020 that Boris Johnson, and I quote here, was obsessed with older people accepting their fate and letting the young get on with life and the economy going quite bonkers, a set of exchanges. This idea that Boris Johnson was of the mindset of the older people, they should accept their fate and we should concentrate on the young people. As a doctor, how does that sit with you?
That doesn't sit. That wouldn't sit well at all. Did he say that? I mean, I've never heard him saying that on air or anywhere.
This came from the notebooks of Sir Patrick Vallance. Again, they will all come out in the inquiry. But if he did say that, would that sit well with you?
There is no proof. I mean, I can just sort of tell you about how things went. And yes, the mortalities were higher. Probably the lockdown happened a little later, and there were other confounding factors as well. But the way the vaccines were rolled out, you have to give the credit where it's due. And this guy did a great job. Okay. And yes, he messed up the other thing, but at least as far as that's concerned, and I've got friends from all over the world. OK.
Sarah, thank you. I'm only going to leave it there because I want to squeeze in a few more people. Ruth in Hampshire. Good afternoon, Ruth. What would you like to say? Ruth, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Go ahead, Ruth. What would you like to say?
I just think Boris was a bumbling idiot through the lot of it.
What makes you say that?
Well, he didn't seem to know what he was doing. He said one thing and then did another. And it just kept on going. Right through his prime ministership.
OK. Nick, something that came out yesterday, Martin Reynolds from the Civil Service was giving evidence. Part of the evidence that came out yesterday was the frustration. Ruth used bumbling idiot as the words. That wasn't quite what they used there. But the idea that there was a lot of frustration behind the scenes, that Boris Johnson kept changing his mind.
Yeah, he did.
And that I think one of the phrases was the captain is changing the plays on the field every day. So we can't sort of get that consistency. What do you make of that and the criticism from Ruth?
Well, I think he, without question, yo-yoed. He capitulated time and time again. I think that's his personality, because what he was doing, he did really care about people and he was listening to opinions. And when he heard an opinion which was contrary to his plan of action, he was persuaded.
Which is the absolute opposite of what you want from a leader.
But he'd never been confronted. No leader has been confronted in modern times with this sort of situation. So no one really knew how to deal with it. We were really in the dark. And, you know, to judge him from the number of fatalities, you have to spool back and say, look, we had a poor state of health for the nation. We had a poor state of national health. So there are a lot of other things at stake.
Yeah, but we're not just looking at the death count. We're looking...
He changed his mind all the
time.
time.
We're looking
I agree.
at the fact that, you know, everybody, his closest sort of allies are now saying it was absolute chaos at the time.
Yeah,
that, they're conducting it all over WhatsApp, and it was, the sort of schoolboy antics of going on, sort of texting under the table.
Sure, but
that's politics. Yeah, that's a method of communication. At the end of the day, I don't believe he wanted it, and only time will tell whether actually, if he'd had the guts to say, actually, you know, he needs to be honest with the nation and say, look, the sick and vulnerable, please stay in. The rest, you'll probably have a nasty cold, but get on with your life. Let's keep the economy going. That might have been the better course, and I think that's the course he believed in, but he was persuaded to lock the country down, and I don't know whether that was for the benefit of everybody.
What's interesting is the decisions that people were confronted with and what they chose to do at the time is going to be the interesting part of the COVID inquiry. I think perhaps we can all agree that perhaps we've all said things in meetings that perhaps we would have been
I do agree.
Uncomfortable whether we said them out loud.
Yes.
If they out of context later.
It is different, you know, especially over WhatsApp and stuff like that. I wouldn't want some of my WhatsApps being shown, but they are now being shown, and there is a COVID inquiry, and it was really important decisions that are being made. So he has to now apologise. It's very simple.
Let's take some of your messages. Sue on Facebook says they should all be in prison for theft of taxpayers' monies and their total mismanagement of the whole pandemic. Susan on Facebook says, it's easy to judge with hindsight, but no one actually knew what to do for the best at that time, which is your point as well, Nick. I wonder how much of this will affect, for example, the coming election, how much it's going to affect the Prime Minister, because let's not forget, he was in that room when it happened. He was the Chancellor. Again, coming out of some notebooks and evidence that he was not particularly pleased or unwilling to offer compensation for people to stay at home in isolation for the poorest paid. You know, that might come back to the Prime Minister.
A lot of people think the way he gave money away, it was like a money tree, wasn't it, without any due diligence, you know, and it's probably bankrupted the country. So he'll have his questions to answer without question.
All right. Well, look, we've used up all our time. Thank you so much to both of you. That's it for today. Thank you to Nick and to Georgie. Jeremy's back at 9:15 tomorrow morning. Until then, have a wonderful afternoon wherever you are. See you all at the same time tomorrow.